We often hear about national development as this great story of progress. But what happens when that progress for some means absolute ruin for others? Today, we're diving into a critical, and often invisible, crisis, the plight of the landless in India, where the very idea of progress is being called into question. This is the voice of Wati, and her story. Well, it's not just about poverty. It's about being completely uprooted and left behind by what we call development. Her words really cut to the heart of the devastating human cost of a system that, for all intents and purposes, simply doesn't see people like her. As heartbreaking as Fulwadi's experience is, you have to understand it's not an isolated case, not even close. So let's pull back from her personal story for a moment to see the staggering national scale of this crisis. 56%. Just let that sink in. According to the 2011 socio-economic and caste census, that's how many rural households in India own absolutely no land. This isn't some fringe issue, you see. This is the reality for the majority. And what does that 56% look like in human terms? It's over 144 million people who are classified as landless agricultural laborers. But here's the part that's truly shocking. This number has grown more than 5 times since 1951. So this isn't some old problem that's fading away. It's a crisis that is actively getting worse. And when we dig a little deeper and break this crisis down by caste, the picture gets even more stark. I mean, look at this. While nearly half of all farmers are landless, that figure just skyrockets to a devastating 71% for Dalit farmers. It's a clear, painful example of how historical injustices are being amplified by today's development policies. So you gotta ask, right? How does something like this happen on such a massive scale? Well, the answer, believe it or not, is written right into the law itself. There's a critical blind spot, and it's leaving millions of people behind. Now, if you just read the text of the 2013 Land Acquisition Act, it actually sounds pretty fair. On paper, its whole purpose was to replace an old colonial-era law and make sure that people who lose their land for big development projects get compensated and rehabilitated. Sounds good, right? But here is the absolute crux of the issue. The law, and all the protests and amendments that came after it, focuses almost entirely on the landowners. They're the ones with legal rights, they're the ones who can protest and get the law changed in their favor. But what about the landless laborers, the people who actually depend on that same piece of land for their survival? Well, they're basically invisible. They lose their livelihood, their home, everything, but they have no legal standing, no right to compensation, nothing. And this leads to a really powerful question that the research forces us to confront. Is this just an oversight, a mistake in the legal drafting, or is it a system that is deliberately designed to ignore the rights of these families? It's a tough question, but you have to ask it when you see the consequences. Okay, so we've talked about the law in the abstract. Now, let's see what this legal blind spot looks like on the ground. A case study of 4 villages paints a truly graphic picture of the destruction it leaves behind. So researchers looked at these 4 villages, Makanpur, Nawada, Rohi, and Kishorpur. In each one, huge swaths of land were bought up for major development projects. The landowners, they got rich literally overnight with massive compensation packages. But the people who had worked that land their whole lives, the landless laborers, they got absolutely nothing, zero. And the result wasn't just economic hardship. It was a complete social breakdown. You had this sudden, massive influx of cash to one group and a total loss of livelihood for another. And it created this toxic environment. Alcoholism shot up, domestic violence and caste-based attacks became more common. People were forced to leave. Some women were driven into prostitution. The economic gap didn't just widen, it became a chasm. And then there's this. In just 2 of those villages, a horrifying number of people, 37, died by suicide. This happened right after the land acquisition money started flowing. People interviewed in the study said it was because of immense pressure from moneylenders. And it's no surprise that most of the victims were from scheduled castes, the most vulnerable group in this whole equation. This isn't just about money, though. Listen to this quote from a 23-year-old named Rohit. He's talking about how it wasn't just economic pressure. It was direct, violent threats, fueled by caste prejudice, used to literally force landless families out of the only homes they'd ever known. So where do you go when you've been thrown out of your village? The study found that for so many of these families, with nowhere else to turn, the road ends in the slums of major cities. Their communities are shattered, their social fabric is completely torn apart, and they're just pushed into a brand new cycle of urban poverty. Now, this is an incredibly bleak picture, I know. But the research we're looking at here doesn't just stop at describing the problem. It actually proposes a clear path forward, a way to redefine what development for all should really mean. The argument is that the change has to happen on every level. So first, at the constitutional level, make land ownership a fundamental right. Second, legislatively, create a special government department whose only job is to look out for the welfare of the landless. And third, and this one is huge, at a policy level, just redefine the word farmer. Make it include the people who work the land, not just those who own it. Think about that. That single change could unlock compensation and rehabilitation rights for millions and millions of people. And that brings us right back to the central question, the one at the very heart of this research. When development, the thing that's supposed to lift everyone up, actually creates poverty, when it shatters communities and targets the most vulnerable citizens, you just have to ask, who is this development really for?